The United States has implemented strict export controls aimed at limiting China's access to crucial technologies, particularly in the semiconductor and AI sectors. These measures include blacklisting major Chinese companies such as Huawei and SMIC, expanding the foreign direct product rule, and restricting the export of advanced semiconductor manufacturing equipment. The goal is to protect U.S. national security and preserve technological dominance. In response, Beijing has escalated trade tensions with Washington by banning the export of key materials critical to high-tech and defense applications. This move, announced by China's Ministry of Commerce on Tuesday, is seen as a reaction to the U.S.'s tightening of technology-related sanctions on China. Trade wars are not a new phenomenon. They have shaped global history for centuries. Before delving into the details of the current trade conflict, it is helpful to explore the history and impact of earlier trade wars. One significant example is the Opium Wars, two mid-19th century conflicts between China and Western powers, primarily Britain, centered on trade disputes over opium. These wars had lasting consequences on China's sovereignty and its relations with foreign nations. In the 18th century, European demand for Chinese goods such as silk, porcelain, and tea created a trade imbalance, with silver flowing into China. To counter this, the British East India Company began exporting opium from India to China, which led to widespread addiction and social problems. Alarmed by these effects and the outflow of silver, the Qing dynasty banned opium in 1796 and 1800. However, British merchants continued to trade opium illegally. In 1839, Emperor Daoguang appointed Lin Zexu to eliminate the opium trade. Lin confiscated and destroyed large quantities of opium, which prompted Britain to launch a naval expedition. The British forces, with superior military technology, defeated the Qing army, leading to the Treaty of Nanjing in 1842. This treaty ceded Hong Kong to Britain, opened 5 ports to British trade, and imposed indemnities on China. Tensions remained high, and in 1856 the Second Opium War broke out, with France joining Britain against China. The conflict ended with the Treaty of Tientsin in 1858 and the Convention of Beijing in 1860. These agreements legalized the opium trade, opened additional ports to foreign trade, allowed foreign legations in Beijing, and granted foreign vessels access to China's interior waterways. The Opium Wars marked the beginning of what is known as the Century of Humiliation for China, leading to significant territorial losses and a weakening of sovereignty. The treaties that followed are often referred to as unequal treaties, because their terms heavily favored Western powers. The consequences of these wars weakened the Qing dynasty and exposed China to increased foreign influence and internal unrest. A more recent example of a trade conflict is the Smoot-Hawley Tariff Act of 1930, a major U.S. legislation designed to protect American businesses and farmers during the Great Depression. The act imposed high tariffs on more than 20,000 imported goods and raised average tariff rates to nearly 60%, the highest in U.S. history. In retaliation, other countries quickly imposed their own tariffs, which led to a 65% reduction in global trade between 1929 and 1934. For example, Canada, one of the U.S.'s largest trading partners, imposed tariffs on 16 U.S. products, affecting about 30% of U.S. exports to Canada. The decline in international trade exacerbated the global economic downturn. U.S. imports fell by 66%, from $4.4 billion in 1929 to $1.5 billion in 1933, while exports dropped by 61%. This contraction worsened unemployment and prolonged the Great Depression. Economists and historians widely regard the Smoot-Hawley Tariff as a policy failure that deepened the economic crisis, serving as a cautionary tale about the dangers of protectionist trade policies. In the early 1960s, the United States faced another trade dispute with several European countries, most notably France and West Germany, in what became known as the Chicken War. This conflict arose when European nations imposed tariffs and price controls on U.S. chicken imports to protect their struggling domestic poultry industries from the influx of cheap American chicken. In retaliation, President Lyndon B. Johnson's administration enacted a 25% tariff on several European imports, including light trucks, potato starch, dextrin, and brandy. This measure, known as the chicken tax, had a significant impact on the automotive industry, especially on German manufacturers like Volkswagen, which had been exporting light trucks and vans to the U.S. The imposition of the chicken tax led to a sharp decline in imports of these vehicles, effectively shielding U.S. automakers from foreign competition in the light truck market. Over time, this policy shaped the dynamics of the American automotive industry. The tariffs on potato starch, dextrin, and brandy were eventually lifted, but the 25% tariff on light trucks remains in place to this day. This enduring policy has had long-lasting consequences, notably encouraging foreign automakers to establish manufacturing plants in the United States to bypass the tariff. The U.S. restrictions also pushed China to prioritize self-reliance, leading to substantial state investments in research and development. Companies like SMIC have made significant strides in semiconductor manufacturing, while domestic innovation in AI, quantum computing, and telecommunications has surged, driven by increased funding and government incentives. China has strengthened ties with non-U.S. technology providers and countries that are not fully aligned with American policies, such as Russia and certain European and Asian nations. Through strategic partnerships and initiatives like the Belt and Road, China has diversified its supply chains and reduced its dependence on U.S. technology. The extraterritorial reach of U.S. export controls has strained relationships with key allies and partners, with companies like ASML and TSMC seeking to reduce their reliance on U.S. technologies to avoid being impacted by these restrictions. Major U.S. tech companies, including NVIDIA, AMD, and Lam Research, have reported significant revenue losses due to reduced access to the Chinese market, which has hurt their economies of scale and potentially undermined their global competitiveness in the long run. Despite these export controls, Chinese companies have launched advanced products demonstrating technological sophistication. For example, Huawei's new AI chips and smartphones incorporate cutting-edge designs and manufacturing processes. China's indigenous innovation strategy, supported by state-led initiatives and international collaborations, has fueled remarkable progress across several industries. The trade war between the U.S. and China, which began during President Trump's first term, marked a significant shift in their economic relationship. It was characterized by the imposition of tariffs on hundreds of billions of dollars worth of goods, disrupting trade flows and creating uncertainty in global markets. The conflict began in 2018 when the Trump administration imposed tariffs under Section 301 of the Trade Act of 1974, citing intellectual property theft, forced technology transfers, and unfair trade practices by China. The U.S. also pointed to its large trade deficit with China, which exceeded $375 billion in 2017, as evidence of these imbalances. The first wave of tariffs in July 2018 targeted $34 billion worth of Chinese goods, including machinery, electronics, and industrial products. In response, China retaliated with tariffs on U.S. agricultural products like soybeans and pork. By the end of 2019, the U.S. had extended tariffs to $550 billion worth of Chinese imports, covering a broad range of consumer goods such as electronics, textiles, and toys. Meanwhile, China imposed tariffs on $185 billion worth of U.S. exports. These measures significantly increased costs for U.S. businesses reliant on imported goods, often passing the burden on to consumers through higher prices for everyday items. China's retaliatory tariffs severely impacted American farmers, particularly soybean exporters, whose sales to China plummeted as Beijing turned to alternative suppliers like Brazil. The U.S. government provided over $28 billion in aid to farmers between 2018 and 2020 to offset these losses. Economically, studies showed that U.S. consumers and businesses bore much of the tariff costs. For example, the Federal Reserve Bank of New York estimated that in 2019, tariffs cost the average American household $831 annually. At the same time, Chinese exports to the U.S. declined in key sectors such as machinery and electronics, prompting China to diversify its export markets and boost domestic consumption. The growing risks of overdependence on single-source suppliers are prompting United States allies to reconsider their positions in the global trade landscape. While some countries may continue to align with the U.S., others could shift towards China to avoid becoming collateral damage in geopolitical confrontations. This potential fragmentation of global trade networks poses a significant challenge to the U.S., weakening its influence and disrupting long-standing alliances. China, leveraging its dominance in critical materials, has underscored its ability to retaliate against U.S. trade restrictions. By taking countermeasures, China neutralizes the impact of new U.S. sanctions, further strengthening its own negotiating position on the world stage. This move signals China's readiness to escalate economic confrontations, raising the stakes for future policy decisions. President Trump's aggressive trade stance risks alienating key segments of the U.S. business community, as well as allies who rely on stable trade relationships with China. Industries dependent on Chinese goods and materials now face rising costs, threatening domestic jobs and economic growth. This economic blowback could undermine the administration's promises of revitalizing U.S. manufacturing, creating political challenges as the effects of these policies hit home. In another significant development, President-elect Donald Trump issued a stern warning to the BRICS nations, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, against pursuing a new currency that could challenge the U.S. dollar's global dominance. He threatened to impose 100% tariffs on these countries if they went ahead with plans to replace the dollar, emphasizing that such actions would trigger severe economic consequences, including restricted access to U.S. markets. China's role in the shift toward a multipolar financial system. China, as a leading member of the BRICS, has been at the forefront of efforts to internationalize the Chinese yuan, renminbi, and reduce global reliance on the U.S. dollar. This strategy includes promoting the yuan in global trade and investment, forming currency swap agreements with various countries, and launching yuan-denominated financial instruments. Notably, China has encouraged Middle Eastern oil exporters to accept the yuan for oil transactions, marking a significant step towards financial independence from U.S.-based institutions. China has also played a pivotal role in the BRICS bloc's initiatives to create alternative financial systems. One key achievement is the establishment of the New Development Bank, NDB, headquartered in Shanghai, which aims to finance infrastructure and sustainable development projects in BRICS and other emerging economies. Furthermore, China has promoted the use of local currencies in trade between BRICS nations, thus reducing dependence on the dollar and mitigating exposure to currency fluctuations and geopolitical risks. These efforts align with China's broader strategy to enhance the yuan's role in the global financial system and to establish financial infrastructures that operate independently of Western-dominated institutions. The U.S. government views these moves as potential threats to the dollar's supremacy, signaling its willingness to employ economic measures such as tariffs to counter them. The evolving dynamics between the U.S. and BRICS countries highlight the complex interplay of economic policies and geopolitical strategies in the contemporary global economy. Russia's push for financial independence. Russia has also intensified its strategy to reduce reliance on the U.S. dollar, especially in trade with China and other BRICS nations. The country has increasingly used the ruble and other non-dollar currencies in international transactions. Russia is also a strong advocate for the creation of alternative financial systems to reduce dependence on Western financial institutions. A notable development occurred in December 2023, when Iran and Russia finalized an agreement to conduct bilateral trade using their national currencies, the Iranian rial and the Russian ruble, rather than the U.S. dollar. This move is particularly significant given the extensive sanctions imposed by the U.S. on both countries. The agreement, solidified during a meeting between the central bank governors of Iran and Russia, includes provisions for bypassing the SWIFT interbank system, enabling direct transactions between the two countries using their local currencies. This shift is part of a broader trend among nations seeking to dollarize their economies by promoting the use of local currencies in international trade. For Iran and Russia, this strategy helps mitigate the impact of U.S. sanctions and enhances their financial sovereignty. Iran and Russia's expanding economic cooperation. In addition to the currency agreement, Iran signed a free trade agreement with the Russia-led Eurasian Economic Union, EAEU, in December 2023. This agreement eliminates customs duties on 90% of goods traded between Iran and EAEU member states, further integrating Iran into regional economic frameworks and reducing its dependence on Western financial systems. These developments highlight Iran and Russia's strategic efforts to build alternative financial infrastructures that are independent of the U.S.-dominated global system. India and South Africa's role in a changing global economic landscape. India, too, has been exploring the use of local currencies in trade to mitigate exposure to fluctuations in the U.S. dollar. The Reserve Bank of India has implemented mechanisms to facilitate international trade settlements in the Indian rupee, aiming to increase its use in global transactions. South Africa supports the BRICS initiative to use local currencies in trade and investment, and the country is actively involved in discussions to establish payment systems that reduce reliance on the dollar. This aligns with the broader BRICS strategy to enhance financial sovereignty and independence from U.S.-dominated financial systems. Conclusion: these developments reflect a shifting global economic order, where emerging economies are seeking to reduce their reliance on the U.S. dollar and build alternative financial structures. While the U.S. remains a dominant force in global trade, these moves represent a growing challenge to its economic influence. The evolving strategies of China, Russia, Iran, India, and South Africa underscore the increasing complexity of the global financial system and the shifting balance of power in the international economy. Thank you for watching this video. We sincerely appreciate you joining us today. If you found our content insightful or thought-provoking, please consider liking and subscribing to stay connected with our community. Your support means a lot to us. Don't forget to check out another video from our channel now on the screen.